This program is brought to you by the staff of the Old Idaho Penitentiary, a division of the Idaho State Historical Society.
Are tour guides given a script and told not to say anything bad about the prison's history? A former inmate made this claim on several tours at the Old Idaho Penitentiary. There is no script for staff or volunteer tour guides. Guides are given reading materials including previous written histories, oral histories of inmates and guards, newspaper accounts, warden reports, and they have access to all archival material. Anyone can be a volunteer tour guide and can share history as long as they register with us as a volunteer and share an outline of their tour. There were really awful, corrupt, and violent acts that happened at the Old Idaho Penitentiary. In contrast, there were also really inspiring stories of redemption and the human spirit. The Idaho State Historical Society does not seek to disparage anyone, be it an inmate or former employee, but we do display the history of the site openly and honestly in historical context. Did a prison bishop reside at the bishop's house next to the old pen? This is a common misconception given the bishop's house proximity to the Old Idaho Penitentiary. The bishop's house was not even located at this location until 1975. Built by the Episcopal Church in the 1880s, the church's bishop resided in the home. The house originally rested at 2nd and Idaho Streets in downtown Boise near present-day St. Luke's Hospital. In an effort to save it from demolition, the Friends of the Bishop's House organization was created, and the Idaho State Historical Society provided the land to preserve the home. To date, the Friends of the Bishop's House operates the home on behalf of the Historical Society. This house is not open for regular tours, but can be rented for various occasions. Visit their website for more details. Were any female inmates executed at the old pen? The origin of this myth is unknown. In Idaho, from territorial time through today, an individual must be convicted of first-degree murder in order to be eligible for the death penalty. Only one female inmate was ever convicted of first-degree murder. Her name was Elizabeth Lacey, inmate number 7610 in the year 1949. Lacey served 13 years, 7 months, and 29 days, but never came close to the gallows. Lyda Southard, a suspected serial killer of husbands and family members, was only convicted of second-degree murder in the death of one of her husbands. She, too, was eventually released, but was never threatened with the hangman's noose. Are there inmate files and other historical documents stored at the old pen? This is a common misconception of visitors and donors, believing the Old Idaho Penitentiary keeps the documents and artifacts on site. The Old Idaho Penitentiary is a division of the Idaho State Historical Society. The Idaho State Historical Society also includes the Idaho State Archives, Idaho State Historical Museum, the State Historic Preservation Office, and historic sites throughout the state. Although the Old Idaho Penitentiary Historical Site is a museum, it is not a repository for archival records and artifacts. The Idaho State Archives holds and maintains all original documents and records from the Old Idaho Penitentiary's history. Records like inmate files, oral histories, mugshots, historic photos, and warden reports are all kept at the archives. Artifacts and objects from the penitentiary's past are kept and maintained by the Idaho State Historical Museum and are cared for by their curatorial staff. Did Harry Orchard have his own house outside the prison walls? Did he refuse to leave even after he was pardoned? And could he just come and go as he pleased outside the prison walls? The origin of this myth mostly derives from anecdotal stories told through time by guards and inmates. This myth also has a major misunderstanding of how the prison process works. Harry Orchard was the confessed murderer of former Governor Frank Steunenberg. He became quite industrious in his years as an inmate at the Idaho State Penitentiary. He started a shoe shop inside the prison walls, but it was severely underfunded and ceased production. He eventually began a very successful poultry farm on site. He raised mostly turkeys and chickens. Orchard was so successful, he asked and was allowed to monitor the poultry more closely. He built a small cottage on the outside of the walls near the present-day Idaho Botanical Gardens. This is just southeast of the main prison yard. One such cottage burned in a fire, and many of his personal effects were lost forever. Orchard never was pardoned by the state of Idaho. While he petitioned for a pardon several times, Orchard never lobbied hard for his release and resigned himself to living out his life at the penitentiary. A March 13, 1950 Life magazine article chronicled the life and times of Harry Orchard. A photo of Orchard leaving the main stone archway at Warm Springs Avenue with a small dog even stated he could come and go as he pleased. This was not accurate. While Orchard was afforded much freedom in comparison to his fellow inmates, he was still accountable to the warden and guards. They knew his whereabouts at all times, and he was not allowed to freely walk about town. Was number 2 yard located where the Idaho Botanical Garden currently sits? This information is provided by tour guides, oral histories, and other archival documents. The penitentiary operated most of the land extending south towards the Boise River. The area was farmed and included hay and orchard fields, as well as the prison steam plant in 1902. Eventually, a roughly 4-acre area was fenced in and 2 guard towers were built, encompassing what was soon called number 2 yard. Social service buildings, poultry pens, vocational training buildings, and the prison playing field, dubbed Outlaw Field, were constructed over time. Several buildings were burned in the 1971 riots, and several more were demolished in the 1990s. The former playing field now hosts the Outlaw Concert Series every summer. Did people really watch executions from the Boise foothills above the penitentiary? Anecdotal accounts claimed one warden covered the gallows in muslin because he feared onlookers would attempt to view the execution. The story has been stretched and/or misunderstood by tour guides. Some wardens did, in fact, hang muslin or canvas around the gallows as an added barrier to prevent the possibility of outside viewers. But only prison officials and invited media were allowed to view hangings at the Old Idaho Penitentiary. While residents may have attempted to view these hangings, nearly all the executions occurred at midnight or in the early morning. It would have been much too dark to see any activity from the distance. Where do you store the old electric chair? Visitors occasionally make this claim that there was an electric chair. There have been some erroneous reports on websites that reference an everlasting electric chair at the Old Idaho Penitentiary. Only 10 executions occurred at the Old Idaho Penitentiary during its 101 years of operation. Until 1978, Idaho's sole method of execution was hanging. After the national moratorium on the death penalty was lifted in 1978, most states, including Idaho, chose lethal injection as the preferred method of executions. Idaho has never used electrocution. The Old Idaho Penitentiary State Historic Site used to house the electrical exhibit in the old trustee dorm. The exhibit demonstrated the history of electricity and its uses in Idaho. There was a stationary bike that visitors could use to power a light bulb. Perhaps the reference to electrical in the exhibit contributed to confusion. However, no electric chair has ever been on display at the Old Idaho Penitentiary. Was an inmate actually gang raped to death at the penitentiary? This myth originated from the Ghost Adventures episode that aired December 2008. While there are accounts of sexual assaults as well as consensual sex acts in the history of the Idaho State Penitentiary, no such attack or consensual act resulted in the death of an inmate. The warden's reports reveal every death occurring at the penitentiary and even deaths of inmates released to local hospitals for further medical attention. There is even a section in the biennial reports dedicated to the prison physician. No reports indicate a death like this. While conspiracy theorists might suggest there was a cover-up, remember, other scandals were easily revealed over the years, including the forced abortion of inmate Josie Kinsler's unborn baby in the early 1900s. Was Raymond Snowden Idaho's Jack the Ripper? A popular 1950s detective magazine, True Police Cases, ran a story headlined Blood on His Hands, Idaho's Jack the Ripper and the Butchered Blonde. A Ghost Adventures episode filmed at the Old Pen made a reference to the analogy, which has resulted in a surge of websites and individuals referring to Snowden as Idaho's Jack the Ripper. It is true that Snowden's crime was grisly, but he was not commonly referred to as Jack the Ripper. The real Jack the Ripper murdered multiple women and ladies of ill repute in London. Besides the sensational article, no other sources made the comparison, although one Statesman article captioned a photo referring to Snowden as Boise's Butcher. While many speculated that Snowden's gruesome murder of Cora Dean was not his first, it is the only proven murder he committed.